Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to the CARA Plenary Panel. As you can tell, I'm Lauren Mancia, the chair of CARA, and as you can tell, this is a little bit different from the way it usually goes. We don't have one speaker for this plenary, we have 5. And part of that comes from changes we're making to CARA, which include that there is no CARA session on Sunday, there's no special CARA conference. We're moving all of that stuff to Zoom. If you want to hear more about that, please come to the business meeting or watch it on Zoom, watch it on live stream, right? Or just check out the CARA website for more info about that. Or you could come to the CARA lunch, which is still got spots in it, which is just outside this door at 12:15. So please do join us. So the first order of business, though, is that we get to celebrate service work and teaching work in the Academy done by medievalists. So the first prizes that we're going to give out are prizes for teaching. So the CARA Award for Excellence in Teaching Medieval Studies go to 2 people this year. The first one is Sarah Ann Knutson from the University of British Columbia, who is a co-winner this year. She is the chair of the UBC Medieval Studies program, and she designs and teaches courses on the medieval world. Dr. Knutson's efforts have been instrumental in revitalizing the UBC Medieval Studies program, transforming it into an interdisciplinary initiative called Global Medieval and Early Modern Studies. Her efforts have expanded the program's scope and inclusivity, reaching out to both senior faculty members and recently hired junior faculty across disciplines, as well as to students. This outreach has created a more diverse and vibrant academic community at UBC, bringing together faculty, staff, graduate students, undergraduate students, alumni, and local community members who were previously not included in this campus network. One of her students wrote, quote, "I believe that Dr. Knutson's dedication to accessibility and knowledge dissemination is unparalleled, and I have seen firsthand how her efforts create transformative learning experiences. Her teaching style and mentorship have been a healing process for me. Coming from Iran, where much of my education was dictated by authorities, I developed a dislike for history. However, Dr. Knutson's unbiased and thought-provoking teaching environment has helped me rediscover an appreciation for history from a fresh perspective. Her approach encouraged open dialogue and critical thinking, allowing me to engage with historical content in a way that felt inclusive and respectful of diverse viewpoints. This experience has not only transformed my understanding of history, but also inspired me to finally approach learning with curiosity and openness." So in short, Sarah Ann Knutson has transformed her students and her scholarly community at UBC. So we are very pleased and honored to recognize her accomplishments today. All right, our second honoree today for teaching is Dr. Christopher W. Platts from the University of Cincinnati. Dr. Platts, in the summer of 2023, founded the University of Cincinnati's Art History Outreach Program, which offers interactive, audience-centered presentations on medieval and early modern art for students at local public high schools using the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, or OLLI, for students over 50 years old. This is one of the first times in recent history that CARA has awarded a teaching prize for people teaching outside of the university or helping their students to teach outside the university. So using woodcuts, engravings, and illuminated manuscripts, these presentations are primarily object-based so that students can directly examine and physically handle artworks. After recruiting 8 UC undergraduates and mentoring them as they developed their own presentations, Dr. Platts assisted those students in the high school and OLLI classrooms as they became teachers. To incentivize the students to participate, he offered them modest stipends after he won grants from institutions such as the International Center for Medieval Art. This outreach program is innovative in how it gives undergraduates the tools and encouragement to engage local pre-college and mature students through firsthand appreciations of medieval artworks in their own classrooms. Simultaneously, the program exposes UC undergraduates to medieval art while training them to offer object-centered presentations to new kinds of audiences. In short, Chris Platts has transformed his students and his community, not just inside the walls of the university, but outside of them as well. And so we are pleased and honored to recognize him and his accomplishments today. All right, I'm gonna read a final award for our Robert L. Kendrick Outstanding Service Citation. The recipient of this award was not able to be here today, but we're going to celebrate her anyway. So the Medieval Academy's CARA is pleased to recognize Dr. Stephanie Bottke, University of the South, as the winner of this year's Robert L. Kendrick CARA Award for Outstanding Service to Medieval Studies. Since 2022, Dr. Bottke has been the lead organizer of the Sewanee Medieval Colloquium. Through her work, Dr. Bottke has cultivated a space of remarkable generosity, conviviality, and intellectual rigor. Each year, she oversees a 2-day colloquium that draws together junior, mid-career, and senior scholars from across the US, Canada, and Europe. The Sewanee Medieval Colloquium has a unique design. Each year, the colloquium has a specific theme, with plenary lectures given by leading scholars from different disciplines in medieval studies, a series of panels organized according to threads related to that theme with a respondent to each panel, a seminar led by a leading scholar exploring a different aspect of that theme, and to mentor junior scholars. Through this varied design, the colloquium shapes the direction of the field in a way that is particularly beneficial to junior scholars. The unifying theme draws on cutting-edge developments within the interdisciplinary field of medieval studies that is often in dialogue with fields beyond the medieval. This model enables scholars to view unfolding developments in the field, something that is particularly valuable for scholars from institutions that do not have thriving medieval studies programs. For the 2024 colloquium, a dean from the University of the South marveled in her introduction at the colloquium at the size and enthusiasm of the audience, noting what an extraordinary community Dr. Bottke had created. So Dr. Bottke's work for the Sewanee Medieval Colloquium is serious intellectual labor and serious logistical labor too. This work is so often unheralded and underappreciated. When things go well, the work of organization is rarely visible, and the hours of work, expert organization, and coordination that goes into creating a seamless experience goes unacknowledged. Dr. Bottke would be the first person to point towards the dedicated work of other Sewanee faculty, students, the colloquium's advisory board, etc., and it would be against the communal, convivial culture of the colloquium to overlook such acknowledgments. But so much of that culture is defined by Professor Bottke's commitment to creating the conditions for academic work to flourish. As Jamie Taylor said, Dr. Bottke, quote, produces a yearly conference which nurtures and sustains the vitality of medieval studies, and she does so under increasing financial pressures. That she does so with joy and poise not only demonstrates how special and important she is to the field, but also is a reminder to all of us that this work can and should be done in the spirit of community through shared intellectual rigor and pleasure alike. In short, Dr. Bottke embodies the values celebrated by the Kendrick Prize for doing, quote, work that often goes unrecognized by the profession at large, with professionalism, passion, and poise. So it is our pleasure to recognize her work today. Okay, so I'm gonna call the panelists up to the table here, and while they slowly make their way up, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what you're going to see. So over the course of the fall, we've been having Zoom meetings for CARA to sort of talk about what it is that people around North America need in CARA. And what it seems like they need is honest discussions, honest sharing about what people are doing at different campuses to keep medieval studies alive and to keep the humanities alive. And we're not just talking about people who have medieval studies programs or majors or minors. We're also talking about people who maybe don't have those things at their universities, but are still working to integrate medieval into the curriculum in this current environment. And so that's what this panel is going to be today. We have 5 different scholars. I'm going to tell you who they are, not by their research and by their institutional affiliations and such, their PhD affiliations, but instead by what it is that they do on their campus as service. And the hope here is that we have each of them present for 10 minutes, and then after 50 minutes, we have about 20 minutes together to talk about what they've brought up, to invite you all to share things that are happening on your campus, and to continue that conversation afterwards outside over lunch. So where you can find that person who is working on micro-credentials and you're going to talk to them about what's happening on your campus and how can you navigate your state government, et cetera. Okay? So we have here from your left to right, Kathy Salzer, who's an associate professor of history at Penn State University Park and is her department's director of undergraduate studies. And she's going to speak today about putting medieval into general education courses to promote humanities courses to non-humanities students. Next is Wendy Matlock, who's a professor of English at Kansas State University and who's working with other classicists and medievalists on campus to create an interdisciplinary undergraduate micro-credential. Then we have Sarah Lynch, who's an assistant professor of classical and medieval studies at Bates College and has recently transformed Bates's medieval studies curriculum over the past few years. Then we have Martina Saltamacchia, who's an associate professor of medieval history at the University of Nebraska at Omaha and the director of the Medieval Renaissance Studies program for the past 12 years, where she's worked with the broader Omaha community and the medieval and Renaissance world that exists there in the public. And then Emily Thornbury is associate professor of English at Yale and is the chair and DGS of the program of medieval studies at Yale, where she's eager to think about strategies to support future scholars in the field. So off we go. Take it away, Kathy.
How do I get this so, yeah, awesome, thank you. So I'm Kathy Salzer. First I want to thank Lauren for putting this together. We've had many conversations over the last few months and this is actually it's really exciting, particularly because teaching isn't often talked about. Yeah. So I'm looking at the general education courses and initiatives, and let me put my slide up. Okay, I have 3 main avenues, at least at Penn State, and I grant you that we're a massive university. I'm at University Park. We have, I think, 45,000 undergraduates. And so I think I'm the representative of the behemoth. And so I have 3 ways in which I would suggest that we support both humanities and then also, in particular, medieval studies. The first is through initiatives, and we've already heard about several of these today, and you're going to hear about several more. The initiative at Penn State was, as you can see on the slide, created by 2 of my colleagues at the Berks campus, which, by the way, is one of the campuses that will survive if you watch the news. And this is Michelle Ramsey and Cheryl Nicholas, and they, on their particular campus, wanted to foster more humanities courses. And so they worked with, they created the Keystone Certificate, and Pennsylvania is the Keystone State. So they got funding through the Teagle Foundation, and then also through the NEH, and they put together this Keystone Certificate, which is basically requires 4 humanities courses, and particularly at Berks, they don't have a lot of humanities courses, so they were trying to foster it for Berks, and then they asked those of us on other campuses to help them with it. You have to take 4 humanities courses. 2 of them are required. There's a Humanities 101 and 102, and I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. And then just 2 other humanities courses. And it's a way for, at Penn State, to get students who are in business or STEM students to encourage them to take more humanities courses. I did not work with the funding. I just actually created the particular Keystone certificate at UP. But the Teagle Foundation, I just wanted to point out, is a remarkable foundation, and I've done a little bit of research. They offer funding in a wide variety of ways. Purdue, Indiana, they have schools in North Carolina, Vermont, Iowa, Texas, Oregon, and there are probably many more. And they have helped colleges ranging from community colleges to liberal arts colleges to regional universities and to R1 universities like Penn State. So, and they've got a great website, and it's a place that you can at least see if there's funding. Okay, my second theme I'm going to just promote flexible courses. And the first of these courses is Humanities 101, and I have taught it. The official title is Transformative Texts Part 1, Foundational Knowledge, and at least with the Keystone certificate, each of our campuses who offer this, we had to put together basically what are the books? The great books list. The one at Penn State, at University Park I think it's 14 pages long, and I put it in 9 or 10 points. It's ridiculous. So in each of the courses, so for Humanities 101, which is a pre-modern course, and it's international, which is the IL, and it means that at least 50% of that course has to be international. But what was wonderful is that they created this as a pre-modern course. We at UP have had 2 versions so far. The first is by my colleague Ronnie Shaw. His is titled Personal Freedom and Political Order in the Ancient World, China and Greece. And you have to use a minimum of 4 of these texts. And I used a lot more shorter versions as well as my 4 texts. But he used Lao Tzu, Confucius, Zhongzhi, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And then I've taught my version twice, Human Exploration, Migration, and Conquest in the Pre-Modern World. And I chose my topic partly to, my way of protesting to talk about migration in a way that might be apolitical and just showing that humans have always migrated. And so that's why I chose that as my topic. And the 4 primary texts that I use Homer's The Odyssey, particularly Book 9, the Vinland Sagas, which I love, Ibn Fadlan, and then Cabeza de Vaca, the Chronicle of Narvaez expedition. I apologize for my Spanish pronunciation. And so this is it's a broad course. Anyone who teaches it can choose their own theme. And Ronnie and I have chosen different themes, and then the people who will teach it in the future will. But it allowed me in particular, so if you notice, 2 of my 4 texts are medieval. Another way to do this, at least at Penn State, is through History 302W. It's our undergraduate seminar, and it's a course that everyone who's a history major has to take. And then we also have a lot of other students who take it because it is writing intensive, and they can get credit for the writing intensive element. Ben Hudson, and many of you probably know him, Ben Hudson and I are the 2 medievalists who usually teach this. I try and rotate when I'm doing this through all areas of the world, different time periods, but when Ben and I teach it, he teaches the Vikings. And I'm going to come back to that on my next slide as well. And then I usually teach it as medieval travel, trade, and exploration. And it wasn't until I put this together that I realized that I do a lot of travel and trade and exploration in a lot of my classes. And it's a particular course, in history. But it's not really a general education course, but it does give them a GH credit. And I think they're at Penn State, these are just 2 ways you can use, flexible topic courses. And then last but not least, I would argue in favor of surveys, and not just surveys like Western Civ or World Civ, but surveys on medieval history. And I've got a number of these listed up there, and I've color-coded them. Within, or at Penn State with these surveys, there are 3 elements that I think can make some of these really successful. And the first, if your college or university allows it, is to cross-list courses. And so in my blue highlights, I have highlighted some of the courses, and these are just some of the medieval or pre-modern courses across the campus. Africa 191, which tails in with our plenary from yesterday, early African history, and it's cross-listed between African studies and history, and we offer at least 2 sections of it each term. Another, if you go down to the history courses, History 107 is actually cross-listed with our medieval studies and medieval Europe, and there are a couple of us who teach that. A little further down, 165, which is Islamic states, societies, and cultures. And this one is cross-listed between history, Arabic, and religious studies. And so we actually pick up a lot of students from quite a number of different majors and/or basically majors. The fourth one, you notice that it has both a Q and then also the cross-listing. This is a very, very specific course. I wish I could take it. I just can't, drop in and take courses at Penn State. This is one of our Italian professors who created this course, and it's at 240Q, so it is actually a general education course. It's called Artistic, as you can read, Artistic Patronage in Europe, and it's cross-listed between history, comp lit, and women's studies, and Italian. So now, that's the advantage of this course. The disadvantage is that she is the only one who teaches it. And so I know that it's been taught twice over the last 5 or 6 years, but she has to be able to fit it in with her other Italian courses. So that's the drawback on my purple ones, where there's something unusual about the course. And in that case, I wish she could teach it every year, but she has to build it around what else she's teaching for the Department of Italian. But I do have 2 other courses that are up there. English 190Q is, Q is inner domain, and in this case it's general arts and general humanities, and it's also an honors course, which is what the Q is. And I have a student who's currently, she's writing her B.Phil with me, and she's taking this currently and loves it. So I know for English, it's actually a really popular course. It's really tough, she tells me, but it's actually talking about modern interpretations of medievalism, and that one's been very, very successful. Another one, the other purple one that I have highlighted is History 128N, and this was a math professor and a classics professor who asked, and I take care of all the new courses as well, and they teach a course on cultural perspectives on mathematics. And it's fantastic because it's a GH, but also a GN, which brings in science. And we're soon to be cross-listing it with classics so we can bring in more students with that. And then the third suggestion I have with some of these courses, popular themes. And so I've mentioned the English 190 medievalism. It's a really popular course, and you get both English majors and then my bachelor philosophy major. A lot of different majors actually take that. And it counts for the medieval studies major as well. Others, really popular. The mathematics one was popular because we had a lot of math students coming in to take a history course. My other 2 examples, and it shouldn't actually be surprising, anything having to do with warfare seems, okay, anything having to do with warfare is always popular. So the Crusades course, which I teach and a couple of others, it fills every single time. And little do they know that it's not going to be the Crusades as they think that it's going to be, but it gets them into the classroom. And the other is that History 302W that Ben Hudson teaches on the Vikings. Seriously, hands down, the most popular course in the history department. And so choosing popular themes and titles actually helps a lot too.
I'm I'm just going to wait for my PowerPoint to come up, or do I have to do something? Okay. It's coming. There it is. Okay, I'm going to manage all of my technology, so bear with me. I want to thank Lauren and CARA for inviting me to be part of this conversation, and to the Medieval Academy and my home English department for helping fund travel so that I can be here. I first heard of micro-credentials about 10 years ago as an alternative to the T-shaped model of higher education. That model emphasizes breadth, usually through a liberal arts core, and depth, usually through a disciplinary major, and it's intended to educate the whole person. Micro-credentials, in contrast, permit targeted, practical training that can be built to follow an individual's interests or professional needs. I'm not here to advocate for micro-credentials. They're a trend. A 2024 Inside Higher Ed article reported 59 state-led initiatives to bolster and expand micro-credential programs across 28 states, adding up to investments of more than $3.18 billion. Given this environment, I'm going to explain how the pre-modern scholars at Kansas State University are using a micro-credential to show the continued vitality of our fields and welcome students to historical study. I do not need to tell an audience of medievalists that the university is an institution built on tradition and innovation, and that collision can be incredibly productive. Even in a neoliberal university such as my own, you can appeal to both for fundraising campaigns. On your left side, we have the Hale Library Great Room, which is part of the historic Farrell Library that was built in 1927, but evokes here, medieval institutions in Europe. It sustained severe damage and water damage in a 2018 fire, and private money helped to restore the room, including the 1934 WPA murals beyond what insurance coverage would have provided. Currently, the institution has a campaign to raise money for a new global center for grain and food innovation. This is explicitly innovative. It's in the title. But the tradition in this endeavor became clear to me when a colleague and friend who's a food scientist involved with this kind of work came to my medieval literature class last month to talk about milling and the Reeves Tale. So they're there. Here's a place where they come into conflict, and this is the problem that our pre-modern credential is intended to address. This is the new Kansas Board of Regents General Education Framework. The final update that I have for you here is from February 2024, and when we were trying to implement it, we called it the bucket model because you have 7 buckets that you have to fill with classes. It throws arts and humanities together into a single bucket, number 6, the sort of salmon peach one up there. The Regents institutions, this is designed to improve time to degree and to facilitate transfers between Regents institutions, which include 19 community colleges and 7 universities in the state. And you can see why this is a problem for us in 3 quick images. Here are the 39 classes that fill the natural and physical sciences bucket number 4, the 40 classes that fill social and behavioral sciences bucket 5, and I could not fit all 232 courses that fill bucket number 6, art and humanities, onto a single slide. But, and let me advance my little slide here, you can sort of see the traditional fields that make up the liberal arts core of the T-shaped model, and how they're being forced into competition by the collision between general education, as it's traditionally imagined, and innovative curricular design. So I like this little drops in a bucket situation represented on this PowerPoint. It highlights that you've got music and philosophy, Swahili and theater, Latin and art, a whole slide of music because, wow, we have a lot of music classes at K-State, and English. It also includes some surprising courses, which suggest that the traditional model didn't accommodate the full breadth of the university either. So these programs found innovative ways to be included. I think most visible over in the English one is Entomology 202, Art and Insects. And there's also Landscape Architecture 101. It gets worse though in practice. We're not just in conflict or in competition with 232 other courses for the same number of credit hours. As we implemented it in the College of Arts and Sciences, we've actually reduced the number of classes that students have to take. So the language requirement helps a little bit. We aren't competing now with Swahili and Japanese, for example, but only the BA, which is an increasingly small number of disciplinary majors, philosophy and history both have the option to do a BA or a BS, for example, only the BA requires it. Previously, both degree paths, the BA and the BS, required 1 fine arts, 1 philosophy, 1 Western heritage, 1 literary arts, and 4 social sciences. That's a total of 24 hours that's now reduced to 9 for the BA, and the BS is even fewer. And FYI, I had to look this up, a quantitative social science requires a math or a statistics prereq. One thing that stood out to me in the new program, in the new curriculum, were requirements presented as electives. So I'm going to begin with the outside concentration, but keep in mind the orientation because I'm going to end with that. The first option's easy enough to understand, but actually pretty rare in practice. You have to come in with a lot of AP credits or be really motivated to take an extra course load if you want to double major. Even the certificate requires 12 hours, minors 18 hours, majors usually about 40. Secondary majors are really exciting interdisciplinary curricula that are completed in addition to a disciplinary major. So great option, but kind of rare in practice. The second option is great for students who come in with a really specific interest. Maybe they're pre-med with an interest in creative writing, so they're going to take 3 creative writing classes in the English department, or they're poli-sci and they're really excited about statistics, so they're going to take 3 statistics classes. But that option really requires a lot of motivation on the student side to put together. The third option provides structure for students who need it and also invites them into areas of study that they might not consider practical enough to major in, the microcredential. So here is how K-State is marketing microcredentials. I would say that etymology, gosh, they're innovative geniuses, has the clearest definition. They say on their webpage, microcredentials are flexible, affordable, and short units of learning we've created for next-gen learners on the go at any stage of life. Through these free courses, we equip learners with digital badges that showcase achievement and demonstrated skills. The department's currently offering, for example, a beekeeping boot camp. I'm not sure how they fund these courses or these microcredentials, but they are non-credit microcredentials that fit very well into K-State's land-grant mission to engage with the whole state. Microcredentials are actually quite new at K-State, but early 4-credit examples include a graduate one in military history and an undergraduate grad one in water quality that's being housed in geology. Our pre-modern cultures microcredential will be one of the first to fit into that new arts and sciences requirement for an outside concentration. We embrace the option because it requires no new course proposals. The other one that's coming out of English is one on writing with generative AI that had to have all new courses proposed. But what we're doing with this one is we're organizing something that already exists. This marketing flyer is our current draft. The proposal made it through Faculty Senate just last week and hopefully will be included in materials for students in the fall. The goal is for the microcredential to make visible a coherent path to study something that students often come to college curious about. Maybe it's from pop culture, maybe it's from personal interests, maybe they took a myth class in high school, and so they can do this with the microcredential and stop. But the courses also count towards minors in history and classics and English and art history, and maybe a student might even decide to double major with a represented discipline. Because it's the familiar language, we went with the bucket vocabulary, and you can see the backside of the flyer and the 3 categories that fit into this culture's microcredential. And you can see that the culture bucket has the same problem as the general education bucket number 6 with a surfeit of courses and disciplines, but I'm really hopeful that the abundance can be helpful here and its interdisciplinary reach. The most enthusiastic response to my putting this together came from environmental design, who immediately wanted to add another section to accommodate our students, who don't exist yet. The least enthusiastic came from modern languages, who told me that there is no plan to offer any of these courses in the foreseeable future. I am hopeful that if this succeeds, we might be able to make a case for hiring experts in medieval French, German, Spanish, or other language. Opportunity 2 is the college-wide orientation, and this is a new course that currently does not fit anywhere into faculty workloads. I am excited about it, though, as an opportunity to reach students in their first year and also to raise awareness about our microcredential among advisors who were involved in summer orientation and enrollment campaigns. When I talk to students in my non-major classes, they always say they're there because their advisor recommended it. So this feels like a good place to make visible what we're doing. This is my working description, and the deadline for it is April 1st, so if you have suggestions to make it more attractive, do tell me. The actual title in the catalog will be Leaving Home, because the full title was too long for our registrar's software. I'm going to be the instructor of record, but the other medievalist and the 2 classicists on campus have agreed to give guest lectures. I will obviously talk about Chaucer's Man of Law's tale about Custance, who leaves home all the time. I'm going to conclude with just some dreams of future possibilities. We have the possibility, we've talked about it, for a center for pre-modern studies. Centers are reportedly good for fundraising, and there are spaces in the buildings that house our disciplines due to faculty attrition. Second, I like the idea of a secondary major because what drew me to medieval studies in the first place was its interdisciplinarity. And on the right, you can see some of the existing, long-established our secondary majors that our new one might fit alongside. Thank you.
Oh, I don't have anything done. Oh yeah. Good morning. I only have one slide for your eyes to rest on while I talk, so here we go. It's much easier for me. So to start off, I want to name names, as it were. I want to thank the colleagues. The work we've done at Bates College's Classical and Medieval Studies is communal. This is not my work, this is our work. So I'd like to just list some of my colleagues, current and former, who have contributed to this work that we're doing. So Laurie O'Higgins, Lisa Maurizio, Mark Tazzoni, Henry Walker, Cynthia Baker, Leanna Brent, Megan Boomer, and former colleagues Grace Gillis, Jen Hughes, Beth Woodward, and Tom Sapsford. So just want to make this clear, this is a communal effort. So this is really a narrative of what we've done over the last, we'll say, 6 to 7 years at Bates, and this includes the period of time before I was at Bates. So beginning around 2018, 2019, CMS began, so Classical and Medieval Studies, which is a discrete unit at Bates, began looking at transforming its curriculum. Firstly, we wanted to broaden our focus geographically, very much so, and embrace global and trans-regional approaches. But we also want to increase more specifically critical approach offerings. The unit already had very strong history of gender studies, but we wanted to look more at race, identity, alterity. Then came 2020. As a result of the various events, especially here in the United States, students at Bates began to demand more attention in the college-wide curriculum to questions that eventually were defined as the following: race, power, privilege, colonialism, and its consequences. At the same time, Bates College received a significant grant from the Mellon Foundation. This allowed us to start to fund transforming our curriculum. All right. CMS was already beginning this, okay, before this happened, but we really embraced this. And we were early adopters of our curricular transformation. So in 2021, we began, and this was just before, so I've only been to one of these workshops, not both of these. We set up multi-day workshops, or what we called retreats. And these were where we would actually start the work of not just transforming our curriculum, but transforming ourselves, preparing ourselves to teach these sometimes new to us, materials and topics. And this was facilitated by Nair Otaño Gracia at the University of New Mexico, who was integral to this process. In these workshops or retreats, we considered different materials and approaches, but we also considered new pedagogical approaches, different ways of approaching our subject matters, not just the material itself. There were also workshops where we spent a lot of time doing self-reflection and considering our motivations for this, how we were as instructors in class, what kind of harms we might have been doing in classes that we were not actually aware of. So this was a very important time. And that's one of the things that's important in these processes is time. At the same time, as we were attending these workshops ourselves, CMS also launched 2 back-to-back lecture series. The first one also funded through this Mellon grant. The first one was entitled Critiquing the Past, White Supremacy, the Distant Past, and Coming Times. And the second was entitled What Comes Next? New Directions in Classical and Medieval Studies. And we had a wonderful range of speakers. And I'm just going to list some of the medievalists who were involved in these. Paula Pasha, Paul Sturtevant, Amy Kaufman, Maggie Williams, Rachel Shine, Elise Wong, and Kathleen Taranu. Gave really thought-provoking papers that were very focused on this critique of our fields. These were important for students. These brought students into these more critical conversations, but they were equally important for us, the faculty, because this allowed us to really see the multitude of approaches. This was very integral to our approach. So that ran until those workshops and lectures ran until last year, 2024. And we intend to continue those lectures because they were particularly generative to our project. So what did this look like in a curricular sense? So firstly, we expanded our offerings in a geographic sense. I'd like to note my colleague and also husband, Mark Lewis Tizzoni, whose work on, who has really expanded the unit's work on offering classes in especially North African history. But our point was not just to offer discrete classes. Our point was to, and this was very much the project that we embraced as part of our race, power, privilege, colonialism, and its consequences approach by the whole college. But we really wanted to interweave that through all our course offerings. And this included language classes. We offer Greek and Latin. And for example, I'm giving one of the examples from our classical side of the house. One of our 300 level Latin classes is entitled Constructing Gender and Imperialism in Rome. So while we sewed our entire curricular offerings with these topics, we also built a specific class, and this is now called CMS 107, Race, Reception, and the Modern Creation of the Ancient and Medieval Past. This was created by Mark Tizzoni and Grace Gillis with a selection of students. So this is a cooperative class that was created by both faculty and students. And this class is now becoming a required part of our major. And it is a third. So it's a third dedicated to basically uses and abuses of the classical past. The next third is uses and abuses of the medieval past. But the third is looking at redemptive uses of the ancient and medieval past. So for example, from the classical side of the house, Medea is a focus of that last third of the semester, because it's the class is designed so any of us can teach it. So we get to pick our own adventure at the end. I know Grace Gillis taught Medea and its liberatory opportunities. We will, for example, be looking at the Harlem Renaissance, thinking specifically of the work of Claude McKay in using these the medieval as a possible liberatory topic. Another thing that was very important to this process was our creating relationships, coalitions, how to sustain this. So, of course, we had standing relationships with history, English, art and visual culture, religious studies, but we've also grown our relationship with Asian studies and rhetoric, film and screen studies. For example, next week, we're going to be having a workshop with one of our Asian studies language colleagues who's just published an article on how identity-informed language pedagogy outcomes. But we really wanted to focus and really embrace our status as an interdisciplinary unit. Secondly, we also established relationships with the broader community. Many of our classes are tagged CEL, Community Engaged Learning, and our current my current colleagues Mark Tizzoni and Liana Brent are currently Mellon Fellows to help build materials for the local K-12 classroom. One of the things we've done, both myself and Mark in our classes, is create English language learning materials for multi-language learning individuals in our community. So CMS is very much becoming part of that local community. Now, going forward, we're actually already seeing these fruits in our students' labour. Our students are writing final year dissertations on things as diverse as anti-Semitism in early Christian literature, race and the sheep-based economy and culture in Iberia, the use of ancient and medieval tropes in white supremacist social media, and even individual papers approaching translation in a critical way. We are also we are actually in the process of proposing a global medieval minor. We're still negotiating the title. Should it be global? Should it be trans-regional? We don't know. And this will involve CMS 107, that core class I've already discussed, one language requirement, one semester of language requirement, which we think is incredibly important, and then a selection that requires students to embrace geographical diversity in their approach to the Middle Ages. Thank you.
Thank you, first and foremost, Lauren, CARA, and the Medieval Academy for inviting me to share with you today our experience at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, trying to build a thriving medieval studies program. When I started in this role as director 12 years ago, the challenge was formidable because what I was faced with was this question: how could I create interest and demand for medieval studies in Nebraska. So for a field largely unknown and seemingly disconnected from contemporary Nebraska life. And as you can see on this slide, actually, the educational framework of the state begins at 1500. So students arrive in college that unless they have got their education through Catholic schools or homeschooling, they have basically never heard about anything before 1500. And the only things that they know about the Middle Ages are Games of Thrones and things like that. And then furthermore, unlike my colleagues in modern history, human rights, and so on, our program started with absolutely no endowments, no prospective donors, and zero funding. So my mission was clear and yet daunting: to make the Middle Ages relevant, fascinating, and indispensable to our community, both within the university and across the wider public. How could we do that? So our strategy has primarily been to showcase medieval studies not merely as a niche hobby, but as an essential intervention for understanding today's world. To do this, we highlight compelling and complex medieval topics, connecting them explicitly and urgently with contemporary issues. So one powerful example that you can see on this slide is our recent event featuring the film Il Moro, followed by an engaging Q&A with the movie director, which provided a meaningful platform to discuss issues of racism, identity, and power appropriation that still persist today. We put this strategy into action mainly through three distinct avenues. First, we insist on academic rigor and credibility by inviting distinguished specialists who share their expertise clearly and compellingly. But crucially, we also require that our speakers communicate in an accessible manner. No jargon, no reading directly from scripts, and always using engaging visuals and storytelling. For example, our event featuring the performance of the unabridged epic poem Beowulf sung in Old English, successfully drawn an audience of 400 from all walks of life, who had the opportunity of experiencing the text as authentically as possible. And I swear, you could hear a pin drop in that room for the entirety of the performance. Attendees were captivated. And this was also made possible because we prepared them beforehand through an accessible and engaging introductory talk that we had the day before, which gave them the tools to deeply appreciate the medieval world. So the idea was, if you have never heard about, forget about Beowulf, if you have never heard about the Middle Ages, what do you need that I give you in an hour to appreciate what you are going to see and listen to tomorrow? Second, we deliberately transform our Q&A sessions from academic formality into genuine community dialogues. We actively encourage and foster participation from diverse attendees, breaking down the barriers that traditionally discourage non-experts from participating. The sessions thus become lively and enriching conversations, often continuing informally with the speaker afterwards for 30, 45 minutes. One memorable example was when I invited a student, a man in his 50s, whom I had taught in prison. I knew that he had recently been released like a couple of weeks before, so I invited him to one of our events. And deeply inspired by the talk, at the end, he went to the speaker and engaged at length in a conversation with her. That night, he wrote me about how the evening profoundly motivated him to continue his educational journey, ultimately visiting my office to discuss how he could pursue higher education. And then third, we actively cultivate new and diverse audiences to creative and intentional marketing strategies. We craft simple, engaging event titles designed specifically to attract broader communities and professional groups who might otherwise overlook medieval topics. So, for instance, and so I give also a shout out to the Centennial Speaker Series. Our upcoming talk by historian Monica Green will have as title, "Where do pandemics come from?" And we are strategically promoting the talk to a broad spectrum of audiences, from nursing schools, medical students, public health professionals, the Omaha Biocontainment Unit, and even the local high school students that will attend the following day, the annual Nebraska Pre-Health Symposium. We proactively develop strong partnership with local cultural and educational organizations, such as the Irish Cultural Circle, with which every March we organize a St. Patrick talk on various aspects of medieval Ireland. The Jocelyn Castle that you see in the slide, yes, we have a castle in Omaha, Nebraska. And what is pictured here is an event that we did for 3 years in a row. So in occasion of the feast of Hildegard von Bingen, we would organize a night with Hildegard. And so the idea was a banquet in the park of the castle with recipes like food and drinks from the recipes by Hildegard, an harpist playing music by Hildegard, and then a lecture that you see on the right with rotating speakers. Like, for example, one year we had a scholar speaking about gemstones, another one on herbs. So various medieval topics that in a way or in another correlates to Hildegard von Bingen. Or, for example, with instead the Cathedral Arts Project, we partner for the Feast of St. Nicholas with a Christmas banquet in which medieval foods are served and musicians and singers of medieval carols sing during the dinner. Financially, we maximize minimal resources by leveraging government and Arts Council funding. Working with only a modest annual budget of $1,500, through careful planning, partnership, and consistent community engagement, we arrive to organize events with budget of $15,000, $20,000. Each year, we have a committed base of about 70, 100 regular community and university participants attending our lectures, which then swells up to 400, 800 attendees for our major annual events and performances. Ultimately, our goal extends beyond simply promoting medieval studies. We foster meaningful and lasting connections within the community, demonstrating clearly how the Middle Ages remain not only relevant, but vital in understanding contemporary society. Thank you.
thanks so much. And I too, like my fellow panelists, want to thank Lauren for organizing a really sort of inspiring and solutions-oriented panel, but also a series of dialogues, and the same to the Medieval Academy for hosting this to think about things that we can really do to make our corners of the world better. So medieval studies at Yale is essentially graduate only. We do have an undergraduate certificate, but no major. And so what I've really been thinking about is how the graduate landscape has changed over the last 15 years, but more intensely over the last 3 to 5. And there's two major ways in which it has become more competitive to get into a graduate program. So one is that there are both more applications and also smaller or fixed intakes among programs that are still offering PhDs. So the chances of any individual applicant are genuinely much lower at this point. And at the same time, it's also much harder for students to prepare for being competitive candidates to enter a PhD program in medieval studies. And this has come from a variety of directions, some of which have been talked about by our panelists already. But essentially, beyond a few elite institutions, and even at many of those, cuts to faculty lines and changes to curricula have meant that many students do not have the opportunity to gain the essential skills that they need in order to conduct research at the graduate level. These especially would include languages, technical skills like paleography, but also just the basic experience in research, especially long-form research. And this means that many students don't have the opportunity to prepare, for example, a persuasive writing sample to make themselves competitive. Now, at the same time, dedicated students and faculty understand this. And one thing that students very frequently do when they realize that their calling is with the medieval is to pursue an MA. And I did a survey of our sort of graduates within the medieval studies program, and the vast majority of them enter with at least one MA. This means that we have students from a wide range of undergraduate backgrounds, but the majority of them have undertaken an MA at one of a relatively small number of institutions that offer these relevant programs. And this is usually really expensive. Students who don't have family funding are very frequently left with major debt. And this means that we are losing a lot of talent because students oftentimes are not able or willing to take on additional debt in order to pursue 1 to 2 years for a chancy outcome. So what I've been thinking about is really the essential role that funded or affordable preparatory programs are going to play in the future of medieval studies. And I just want to offer a shout out really to the amazing work that Lisa Fagan-Davis and Sarah Lipton have done in putting together the Summer Skills Workshop. This is extremely affordable, and Lisa has encouraged me to pick up some postcards which are lying about you all over and bring them to your students who might be interested in taking intensive summer programs on medieval Latin, on paleography, or on Old French. And so this, I think, can show us one part of the solution to ensuring that people from whatever their background will be able to pursue advanced work in medieval studies if that is what they're called to do. But I think we also need to recognize that there are many students who need time beyond a summer to really achieve the kind of mastery of basic skills necessary in order to begin advanced graduate training. 2-year programs are really optimal for this in order to give students the chance to develop not just the deep subject knowledge and skills, but also writing samples. So students in one-year programs we've oftentimes seen are so harried with putting together their applications in that first year that they don't really have a chance to benefit from the program that they are paying very dearly for in many cases. So Yale has had for a while a set of post-bac programs which are mostly ad hoc, most of which are geared towards the sciences. Those are usually 1 year. They are actually, they start with the summer, they're funded, and they include intensive coaching to help students put together applications. And from conversations with the dean in charge of this, they've had a very high success rate. They've just recently in the history of art started a new 2-year program, which seems really ideal. It's new, so we don't know yet what the outcomes are, but it's in particular geared towards museum careers. Given especially that many medieval studies students do want to pursue careers in libraries and museums and other cultural institutions, it seemed to me that the landscape was really well set up to think about putting together a post-bac in pre-modern studies that would be able to help students, again from a variety of backgrounds, cultivate the skills they would need for a PhD and then whatever career that they ultimately chose, whether academic or in another kind of institution. But the funding situation now is not what it was in November, and it is no longer clear when this could happen. So when I sort of suggested this as a topic for discussion, I really thought it would be a possible thing for elite institutions to do this themselves, for this to really be sort of an internally generated set of solutions. And that no longer, I think, is the case, at least certainly in the short term. And at the moment, at least, I think we're in danger of entering a sort of a zero-sum situation where all fields of knowledge are being forced to compete against each other in a sort of knowledge hunger games, which is going to end up really with everyone a loser. But although I certainly would not suggest at this point that it is more important to fund medieval studies post-bacs than it is to continue funding graduate students in immunology who are midway through their program. As we all know, once the chain of expertise is broken, it's very hard to repair. And I think it really, really is essential that we all maintain this as a focus amongst ourselves as well. And to ensure that the pursuit of knowledge is possible for people from any background. So now I'm thinking and talking with people about a variety of other creative solutions to thinking about how this can take place. I think, again, the summer skills workshops offer one possibility here. But I think, in a broader sense, partnerships with independent bodies outside of the university are going to be essential for making programs like the ones that I'm imagining stable for the long term and also hopefully viable in a range of situations. So thank you all very much, and we will look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So I am aware that we only have 5 minutes left for this panel. So what it is that I would like to invite you to do urgently is to continue the conversation over lunch. This is my way of getting you to eat our food. What a horrible deal. Before you get up to leave, though, I do want to make a couple of announcements. The first announcement is sort of dovetailing with what Emily said. CARA has summer scholarships for language study. Those are due April 1st. The summer stipends, what is it called? Skills workshop, thank you, that Emily was just talking about are in Old French, Latin paleography, and medieval Latin. But if you have students who are studying things other than those things, they should apply to CARA. And if you have students studying those things, they should apply to both, but potentially to the summer skills workshop. And if you have questions about this, if you have questions about CARA more generally, I do want to just shout out the CARA executive board members who are in the audience right now and who will be at the lunch. I will be at the business meeting, but you can find me at any other time during the conference. And yet, Maya Sofer Irish, she was waving her hands right here. Keisha Tracy, who just went out to set up the lunch. Carolyn Twomey, is she here? I don't know. And Matthew Vernon are all going to be out there, and you can always talk to them about CARA things. But you should talk to these 5 fantastic panelists about the fantastic ideas they had and how they did them and what you are doing too. So let's look forward to continuing this conversation over lunch. Thank you for coming.